But now looking back, I'm like, Mom was right. She knew. And so that was an experience that
You're tuned in to Leadership Beyond Burnout, where we encourage you and your organizations to heal, lead, and succeed. I'm your host, Dr. Kimberly L. Wilson, and I want to welcome back all of our fired up friends. And if you're new, listen today for some of the actionable steps and challenges to integrate into your workplace and into your life. I want you to feel free to send us questions or to ask our guest questions during the show. Or you can connect with us at drkimberlywilson.com. Today's episode is sponsored by Leadership and Resilience Consultants. Their mission is to create healthy workplace cultures and to give women tools to recover and heal and prevent burnout. Let me share a little bit about today's guest. Today we have Tanya Jaklis. She's a leadership coach and founder of Tanya Jaklis Coaching. It's a boutique coaching practice that designs and delivers customized coaching experiences for individuals and organizations. Now, Tanya is passionate about helping her clients create change in their lives and in the world. She uses mindful approach focused on nurturing well-being and igniting creativity and joy. She delivers one-on-one coaching programs and leads mindfulness workshops for clients across the professional services industry. She believes that pursuing our goals and vision with calm, clarity, and confidence instead of hustle, pressure, and burnout is absolutely possible. She's committed to creating environments where that possibility is a sustainable reality. She's proud IPEC and ICF certified coach and an Energy Leadership Index master practitioner. And without further ado, let us welcome Tanya Jaklis.
Hi, Dr. Kimberly. Thank you so much for that introduction.
Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to have our conversation and share all the nuggets that you have with our audience. And I want to start out with you sharing what you do to bring healing to this world.
What a beautiful question, because that word of healing too is something that is very dear to my heart. And I'm a mom, so one way is mothering my children, but then also mothering myself as I'm going through changes and personal growth. And exploration and discovery and rediscovery. And really just showing up as authentically as possible as myself and supporting others to do the same. I try to do that in all my interactions, personal and professional. And so I feel that has been a way for me to heal. And I feel that then that supports others in their journey as well.
What I really love about what you said, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that, is that you mother your children, because we're really talking about creating the next generation of humans and how they interact with others and the world. So while mothering is not always seen as something honorable and something to commit to and strive for, we're really creating the world.
Absolutely, yes. And I will say I didn't always embrace that. We all have so many different identities, so many different labels, and there's so many different parts of us, right? And I
Yes.
will be completely honest that I didn't always embrace that role of mother, right? Especially in the professional space. It was kind of an afterthought. And I think as I've been on my journey, I'm proud of it, and I take it as a big responsibility, and it doesn't diminish other parts of me, right? It's one part of me. And so I'm proud of it.
Now, you spent 17 years in corporate settings, building teams, building programs, and I read some of your stories. So, do you have a burnout story that you want to share?
I do actually, yes. So that's right. I was in management consulting for about 17 years, working in different environments, really high-powered environments. Loved what I did, challenging environments as well, working with a variety of clients, but then also a lot of wonderful professionals that we used to always say, we're working with so many smart people. Everyone has their strengths, and it was a great experience. I think my burnout story is I didn't realize that I was actually experiencing burnout. I was in the mode of going, doing. I was enjoying what I was doing. It was challenging. And I've always been a very ambitious person, go-getter, getting all the things done, right? Making sure that I follow all the rules.
Oh, you're a rule follower.
Rule follower, and doing all the things and succeeding and being successful. I think burnout for me came when I experienced burnout. And again, at the time, I didn't realize that that's what I was experiencing. I just thought that that's just how life is, right? You have a family, you have children, you have a high-powered job. This is just life, right? You just do all these things.
Just put it all together, right?
You just put it all together and you just keep going, right? And yes, of course, it's going to be hard, but I can do hard things. I'm up for the challenge. And so that was a lot of what was going on for me. And I was just going, and very much on autopilot. And I think the burnout came probably a few years after when my first daughter was born. A year before my first daughter was born, I had also lost my mom. My mom died a year before my daughter was born. And at the time, I also got a promotion after I had my first child, right? So I was experiencing grief, right? I was experiencing joy of birthing a child and welcoming a child into the world. And I was excited and being very successful at work. And I think all of that just came to a collision, right? Because I was trying to do all the things all the time. And
you needed a fire extinguisher.
Right. I just felt tired. I felt tired all the time. I was just really low energy. I was really, I actually landed myself in the hospital with, they ended up diagnosing it as a complex migraine. I had migraines before, but this complex migraine was actually really scary. I was at home working remotely at the time. My husband was taking my daughter to daycare. And then he came back in and I was logging into my computer and I couldn't remember my password. And then I started slurring my speech and my whole right side was completely numb.
So not a heart attack.
Not a heart attack, not a stroke, none of that, because it all came back. Luckily, my husband forgot something and so came back home.
Yes.
And then so he took me to the ER and we were at the hospital. And they did all the scans and they ended up diagnosing it as a complex migraine. It was, really, really headache. And then it was in combination of this numbness and slurred speech. Right. And at the time I had my daughter was 2, I think, 1.5, 2 years old. And I was like, okay, something's got to give. I can't keep going like this. Right. It was I just couldn't keep going, like physically couldn't keep going. So, and interestingly enough, my mom used to always say, if you don't slow down, your body's going to make you slow down.
Absolutely.
And so that still echoes in my in my brain. I was like, she was so right. You don't admit it
Yeah.
when you're a teenager or going through college. But now looking back, I'm like, mom was right. She knew. And so that was an experience that really had me rethinking just how I was going through my days, right? And balancing all the things, or not balance, choosing not to balance all the things, not choosing not to do all the things. I had to make some intentional choices because I couldn't keep going that way because my health was really going to suffer.
Right. I'd love for you to share partly that process of making those intentional choices, because I always believe that when we do some things intentionally, that there is the corresponding grief. There's at this change, at this loss of the life that you had, even though it was causing so much chaos. Or did you not find that to be the case?
I, I found it very challenging. Actually, still to this day, sometimes I find it really challenging to slow down or not to do all the things or not to sign up to do all the things. Yeah, it's gotten a bit easier, right? But I think it's when we're unlearning habits or patterns, right, that we've just been conditioned, right? I was conditioned to just do all the things, to be successful, do the hard things. If it's challenging, figure it out. You're smart. You can keep, do those things. And yes, but not at a cost, right? It's not at a cost of your health and your well-being is something that for me was really important. And for me to ask myself, how is this serving me? How is this supporting me? And I will say, I don't know that there was maybe grief of the way that things were, but it was more of the challenge of learning a new way of being, for lack of a better word, like
Right.
showing up and doing the things. Like, what was that going to now look like? That was hard for me because I found myself reverting back to just how I always used to do things, right?
Right.
Work late, sign up for, raise my hand to do all the things, be the room mom, show up, just keep signing up for all the things.
You have to reframe what success looked like and what your life was going to be.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. I love that you brought up success because yes, like reframing, what is success to me? Is it getting a good, now for me, it's like getting a good night's sleep is success, right? Being able to sleep through the night without waking up and, worried or anxious about something, eating healthy foods, right? So yes, the reframing of success and realizing that it's okay for your definition of success to shift in different seasons of your life.
I also wanted to hone in what you said about you can do hard things, because I absolutely believe that as a society we've been conditioned that anything that's worthwhile has to be hard, and we miss opportunities that they just flow and they just come to us and it feels good, and it's not necessarily hard. Sometimes it's just easy, and we think if it's easy it can't be good.
Yes. Yes.
So it's something you had to reframe as well, because
Yes. I relate to that a ton because I've had instances where things have come easy or things either fell in my lap or things came together. And yes, there was like this self-doubt and this questioning, no, wait, this can't be it, right? It's too good to be, right? It was the thought that I would often have is like, where something's got to give, right? Like something's going to happen. It's like you're waiting for the shoe to fall because it's like, wait a minute. Can't be
yeah,
easy.
this is too easy. So what is the difference between you reframing your success, because you chose to get out of that world, right? The corporate world, for some of the, as opposed to those that you've worked with, because not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. They want to be in those environments. So what type of shift or reframing do you feel that they have to reframe who they are?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for me, it was leaving the corporate space. And you're right. For a lot of people, that might not be the thing. It might be wanting to be successful in that space. But I really think the reframing is allowing and giving yourself permission to define success, what success means to you, right? Obviously, a lot of companies, right, have metrics, performance metrics, obviously, right, that how they measure success, how they measure performance, all very important, and that's how businesses and companies are run. And I feel as though individuals, though, can find a way to define success for themselves, like within those spaces, and being comfortable with doing it and giving themselves permission to do that, right? And allowing themselves to prioritize what's also important to them. You know, many of us have different values, different things that are important to us. And sometimes having that clarity of what is important and how do we then prioritize what's important, right? How do we prioritize it with how we spend our time, how we spend our money, how we spend our energy, right? Is we all can choose that. We all get to choose that. So I think taking back that ownership, right? That you do get to choose how you spend your time, how you define success for yourself, and allowing yourself to revisit that and like revisit how you feel we're in that space and if it's serving you and serving what's important to you.
And when I heard that, I'm imagining someone sitting here listening. They're like, "Oh, I can make all these choices. Absolutely, I know how to make these choices." But my manager, my regional director, will freak out if I do these things. So, what does a person do when their direct leadership or their next reporting person does not believe in this, trying to find harmony and making choices, and they want to see your nose to that grindstone?
Yeah. It's a tough place to be, right? It's really, really challenging and it can be very frustrating and it can also be what's the word I'm looking for? Also just very disheartening, right? Like you can be discouraged by it because it's like, okay, well then let me just put my head down and keep going, right? Which is
Reverting back to
right. Which
what
is
you were doing.
definitely one way to do it. And I know a lot of people that's what they, when they're at work, I'm just going to do what I need to do. And then when I leave work, that's my time and I'll figure, then I'll do the things that, bring me joy. But I would say, and this takes also a lot of courage, is finding opportunities to have open communication with your leadership, right? And that takes a lot of courage, right? Because no one likes to have a difficult conversation or to be in a conflict, right? And something that feels like there's conflict, right? And oftentimes if you're working with someone that's your leader, right? Someone that you answer to, respond to, it's really challenging.
Right, but that unequal power dynamic makes it
Exactly.
a challenge to come from a position of authority and humility. At the same time, there's this dance to insist yet not be resistant.
Yes, exactly. And when you said dance, that's exactly what I pictured, right? Like you're really you're dancing in this conversation. And the reality is it's not only just one conversation, right? It's multiple conversations. And I think the communication piece is what's really, really important. You may not succeed with that first conversation, right? May not succeed with the second conversation, right? And you may not be able to see the progress, but I wholeheartedly believe that having these conversations and these open communications does shift something in the person and the person that you're also communicating with, even if they're not. Sometimes people are not open or receptive to it, right? There's also that resistance that's coming from the person that you're trying to convey your needs, your wants. But I also say you'd be surprised. We're all human, right?
Right. And sometimes even having that conversation may give your direct manager the permission to say, all right, you know what? We could change some things around here. I do want it to be different. And there's usually no harm in trying something for 90 days. Like, that might be a possibility.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And that's the permission piece, is that sometimes too someone might be thinking the exact same thing you're thinking and not speaking up because, again, it's just the way that things are done. So, and change
Right.
is too hard, change is too challenging. But sometimes when it's done in community and it's done with other like-minded folks that are having
Yes.
similar thoughts or ideas, even something as simple, and I've seen this within companies, it's even something as simple as coworkers getting up and taking a walk together in the
Mm,
office, right? Sharing with each other their health goals, saying, I really need to be more active. I really need to move more, right? And then someone saying, oh, me too. That's actually a goal of mine too. And then it's like, okay, how about during lunch we go and walk for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it might be. And so you never know what might open up when you share a need or a want with someone, or a desire that they may have the same one or something different, but then there might be opportunity to support each other, right?
absolutely. Because that one nail sticking up gets hammered.
Yeah.
But if there are a bunch of nails, then sometimes it's just become the fabric. Well, that's just how it is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So do you feel as if, because I know you work with individuals and organizations, and that piece about supporting when there's multiple people engaged in the same behavior becomes very supportive. So would it be fair to say you believe the most sustainable type of change is it when you can get in there to work with an organization as a whole?
Yeah, so I've seen it work different ways. I've seen it work with, when working individually with individuals, right? Individually coaching. And then you see them kind of get empowered and make changes and shifts, right? And then it kind of ripples.
Right.
But I will say that, yes, working with organizations and starting at the top, starting with the leadership, is really where I think where a lot of the most impactful change can happen, when it starts from the top. Not always. Sometimes it is a bottom up effort, but people run into challenges, especially when you have frontline managers that are
Mhm.
trying to implement change, but then the leadership is seeing something different,
Right.
right? It is really hard for that change to stick when there isn't alignment with leadership at the top. And so working with organizations and working with executive teams and leadership teams to match, what they're saying they want their organization and their culture to look like with the actions and the policies and the practices that they actually put in place. That is really, really important in creating that change, or else there's misalignment. And then people don't have trust in what people are saying, because leadership could be saying one thing, but then they're doing something right? They're doing something different. And then
Right.
there's a mismatch.
Right. And what I have found interesting, I have an organization I'm working with now, and it's the leadership at the top that wants all of this balance and change, and they're leading from the front and they're being the example, but it's middle management that is like, I don't trust this. And then those who are doing the work, they don't really even understand that upper management wants the change because it's
Mm.
being kind of hidden from them. So that's been a really interesting dynamic. There's another type of misalignment. So,
That is really interesting. Yeah. And it goes back to the communication, right? The open communication and the transparency. That's so important for any type of change to for any type of change to happen. And
right.
that's really interesting. I'd be curious to know about the middle managers and what's behind the resistance.
Right. It's so interesting to watch because when they're in front of upper management, there's so much buy-in, right? Absolutely. We got it. We got it. But that's not how it's relayed to those that they supervise. They can
Interesting.
just kind of hold the line. So I haven't teased out exactly what needs to shift for them to buy in yet. So we are working on that.
Mm, interesting. Oh, how fun. Working with humans is always so much fun.
Yes, that bring their layers, like as Shrek would say, their layer onions have layers. People have layers. Wow, that's an old movie. So, do you have some routines that you engage in to maintain this burnout recovery? What does that look like for you?
Yes, yes. And so for me, meditation has been huge. Mindfulness practice has been big in my life and in my journey. I'm not always consistent. Like for example, these last few weeks, I have not been consistent with my practice, and I can notice, I can tell that I'm kind of a little bit off center. Um, but mindfulness practice has really been something that's helped to ground me and helped to center me and really kind of get me into my body. And remember that our head and our body are connected. I spent a lot of time in my head, right? Um, Especially in the corporate space, right? You're using your mind, and in a lot of professional spaces, that's what you're doing. But remembering that our bodies are always talking to us, our minds are, there's like a channel, right?
Mhm.
And so listening to my body, right? If I am tired or if I need to rest, listening instead of just pushing through is also a practice that I try to embody as much as possible. Again, I don't always succeed. On every day, it's a little bit different. Um, and it takes practice. And so that's something that I've allowed myself to practice, listening to my body, listening to those cues, allowing myself to give myself what I need. And when I don't succeed, um, giving myself grace as well. And that,
Mhm.
okay, tomorrow's another day or next week's another day, whatever the instance is or the period of time. And knowing that I get to recommit on a daily basis, right? So maybe yesterday I pushed through just a little too hard, right? And I said yes to just a few too many things, right? On both the professional and on the personal side. And so guess what? Today I get to rejigger that a little bit or, reassess. And remember that my priority is my health, my well-being, and knowing that that's important to me. And so those two practices have been things that I think have been with me for the last few years, and I remind myself of on a daily basis because honestly, sometimes it's just day by day.
Right. I absolutely love that you said that. I believe so many people get discouraged when they find themselves reverting back and just say, okay, I can't do this. This is not working because here I am again. And not realizing that this has to be a daily recommitment. It's like you have a commitment ceremony with yourself every day. How am I going to handle this day?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I think the word of recommitting, someone shared it with me a couple years ago and it just stuck with me. It was kind of like, oh yeah, so I do get to choose, right? And like you said, sometimes when you feel like you are reverting back or you're not succeeding, it's very easy to give up and just throw your hands up and say, okay, forget it. Um, but it is possible, and I think it's the practice and the recommitment. I think like with any habit, for example, if we're trying to do something new, right, it doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily maybe stick, or maybe you're not consistent every single day, but you get to try over and over again, and eventually it does. You notice a difference. It does become second nature, but we have to
Mhm.
keep at it, right? Versus being so hard on ourselves, I think. And I think that's where I probably was, especially when I experienced burnout, is I was very hard on myself. And very judgmental of myself, and how come I can't do this, and why am I so tired, and how come, like just all this judgment that I don't think does anyone any good.
Wow. Have you seen this dynamic as well? When people decide to come, I'm going to go out of corporate and I'm going to create my own business, and then they just replicate the same environment that they came out of and wonder why. Why do I feel this way still?
Yes. Are you in my walls? Oh my goodness, Dr. Kimberly. Because that's exactly, that was a situation that I ran into. And then I've watched others, and I've had conversations with my peers, and noticing that, okay, you chose to leave this space that wasn't working for you. And then now you've recreated the same kind of environment, right? And it's really fascinating, because then you get to the same place of dissatisfaction, and you're wondering, how come I'm unhappy? Why am I changed my environment? And yes, that's one piece of it, right? Changing your environment, but you also need to change your mindset and the way that you approach, how you approach work, how you approach your day to day. And, it's so interesting that sometimes we just repeat what we know because it's familiar, right? And trying something different can feel a little uncomfortable. Like when we were talking about things being easy, right? We kind of question and get it. I know for myself, got all in my head, and there's a lot of self-doubt. And so then you get caught up in that, and then you miss out on enjoying maybe what you've created, right?
I know I just found the other day, I had to question myself. It's like, why do I keep avoiding this? Like, you know what? I don't have to do that. I don't want to do this anymore. So either I need to hire this task out or eliminate it, because I get to make that choice.
Yes.
Instead of holding myself hostage to something that just doesn't resonate with the direction that I want to take the business or my life or different things like that. So it's almost like you get amnesia about the promises you've made to yourself or about your business. And sometimes you wake up like Sleeping Beauty and you say, I remember, I've got to do this.
Yes. And that's, I think, too, the practice of, burnout recovery, is that we are all susceptible to burning out, I think. It's just the nature, unfortunately, of our culture and our society of, pushing ourselves really, really, really hard. And when we're not mindful that that's possible, and have some practices and habits in place, and kind of being able to come back to it, like what you just shared, of reminding yourself, wait a minute, I get to choose. I don't have to do this if it doesn't feel good, or if I don't want to do it. And that's sometimes at our own, like, we have to give ourselves that permission, right? To let go of the have to, which I think can be so challenging, so difficult, right? Because we get it from all different places of, it has to look like this, or I should do this, right? Even the shifting of that language and shifting away from the have to. And even if it is, you have to, okay, well, who says I have to? And do I say I have to, or does someone else say I have to? And do I want to listen to who's telling me I have to?
Right. It might have to actually happen, but doesn't mean you have to do it.
Right. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So I also wanted to, because you've been saying a word a couple of times, you've been saying mindful. And I feel like it's one of those words that's out there in the lexicon of social media and the culture, but I'm not sure that everybody has the same definition. So I'd love for you to share, what is your definition of mindfulness and Tanya Jaklis coaching, and just how you work with people?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, mindfulness is really just awareness of the present moment, of being in the moment. You know, for me, when I use the word mindful, is, when I sit down, for example, to have a meal, am I mindful of when I say mindful, I'm like, am I tasting what I'm eating? Am I noticing um, what's in front of me, or am I just scarfing it down, which happens many nights in my house. My kids come in and we just eat, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just rushed through. I don't even know what I just ate. I think it was good, right? My belly is full. Happens very often, right? But for me, yes, mindful is having that level of awareness in the present moment. And when I talk about mindful choices or being mindful about what you're choosing, is knowing that, having that awareness that you have a choice, right? It may not always be a choice that you want, but you are making a choice versus simply being on autopilot, right? And it's just the default. It's having that level of awareness when you're making choices, and knowing that you do have the ability to choose from moment to moment, from every present moment, right?
Right. I feel like it's really interesting how disconnected we can be from our choices in our lives sometimes. But I know I've absolutely, there was a period in my life where I just did a lot of, every weekend I was doing a 5 hour drive, one way, 5 hour drive, another way. And there would be times where I would be surprised where I was in that journey,
Mm.
because it's like I just missed everything that went along. I was thinking, I was deep in thought, I was solving problems, and I'm just driving. And it's like, oh, I'm here already? I was not connected to my experience whatsoever.
Which, unfortunately to say, is so normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our world, being so disconnected in that way, and just being, I don't really like to use the word unconscious, but I heard it recently, actually this week, of just, it is this idea of, most of the things we do on a daily basis are habitual. And so sometimes we're just unconscious, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're doing them, because it's something we're so used to doing. So driving is a perfect example, right? How many times, I know there are so many times when I'm driving home from work and I get home and I'm like, wait, how did I get here? Right? How did I get here?
I meant to stop at such and such,
Yes,
and here
yes,
I am.
yes, yes. And so I think, yes, so the mindful piece is trying to inject that reconnectedness and being in the present moment. Like, okay, I'm driving, like, notice your hands on the wheel, or be able to notice what you see, or just even noticing your thoughts, right? And so that act of being in the present moment, kind of almost reconnecting, allowing yourself to reconnect. And I think that takes some practice, but also just reminding yourself of it, right? Which it's it's not easy. It's not easy.
So, with that not being easy, if this were something that I was just beginning, do you feel like would they see some immediate tangible benefits, or is it like, no, you've got to do this for 90 days, 6 months for it to really be impactful for you?
The noticing, you mean, like the mindfulness piece of
Like,
it?
right, them feeling some type of benefit from engaging in these minute little mindfulness practices.
Yes, yes. Honestly, I think you notice the benefits right away. From even like the first time experience it. Like, even an example I like to give, and I remind myself this too. I love coffee. I've got water in here right now, but usually in the morning, I try to remind myself, even if I only have a few minutes, of like holding my cup of coffee and like feeling its warmth and like smelling it. Right. That's
Mhm.
just a simple act of being in the moment. And sometimes when I'm able to do that, I just feel different. And I even feel a sense of like gratitude for it. So I think even a simple act like that and using your senses of noticing, or like looking outside your window and just noticing what you see, or stepping outside of your front door and like looking around, you'd be surprised how many times I'm like, oh, I never noticed that tree, or I didn't even know that that tree was there. And it brings awe, right? I think. And so I would almost say that the benefits is it happens moment to moment, and obviously over time, definitely the benefits are higher. But I think I do think it's instantaneous. Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite mindfulness practices, and this might be a little odd for some people, is I like to take a piece of food, whether it's a Cheeto, an apple, or whatever it is, and put it on top of an anthill and just kind of watch what they do with it and how organized they are or disorganized, like what it does to the anthill. And you can just kind of get lost in that moment in awe and wonder. And just kind of, it brings like, for me, it brings like a sense of order to the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I think it also brings that it sounds like very like focused, right? Because you're like observing and noticing, and it's just you're in the moment, focused on this one thing that's happening, that you actually created, right? By introducing this piece of food.
Yeah, there's very little room for being anxious or
Yes.
worried or scared or angry when you get absorbed into, like you said, one of your senses or a moment. So it's that relief from pain or anything unpleasant.
Yes. And I think kids do that so well. That's why I'm constantly saying that my kids, they're older now, but when they were younger, they teach you so much because they are able to be in that present moment, right? Where they're not caught up with anything in the future or caught up anything in the past, right? They're in the moment, versus sometimes when we have multiple things running in our minds of things that happened in the past, thinking about the future, right? That gets in the way of us just being in the moment, in the moment.
Right. Seeing that wonder in a child's eyes when they get something new, whether it's a box or it's a brand new toy. It's like brings so much joy because you get to rediscover a moment or a thing that you had maybe you never saw it that way. And yeah, absolutely love that. So if you had to possibly issue a challenge to the audience to begin to have, how did you put it, a possible and sustainable life where there's work-life harmony. I love that you use that. What would you say to them as individuals to begin, and possibly how would they shift the work environment?
Yes, I love this question because a couple things come to mind, but I'm going to just mention one.
Say as many as you want. We've got plenty of time. Say as many as you want.
Because I really believe in this idea of intention setting, right? And setting intentions for your day or your week. So I would invite listeners to consider, like on a weekly basis, at the beginning of the week, or maybe even on a Sunday night, right before you go to work, considering, what are my intentions for this week? What is really important to me this week? Like, what do I want to make sure I create time and space for, right? And listing those I would say, 2 to 3 things. You can have more, but being very intentional about that. And then at the end of the week, looking back and seeing, how did I do? Right? What am I proud of from this week? What could I have done better? Right? And that brings a sense of ability to make choices that are aligned with those intentions, which I find allows people to be, here's the word of mindful again, right? Being mindful with their choices, but then also being present in their day to day, because they've set aside time to create these intentions for the week so that they are more aware about the choices that they make. At the beginning of the week, I said these 3 things were important to me, right? What did I do this week to honor what I said was important, or to honor these intentions, right? And with no judgment, doing it in a way that's supportive to you, I think is powerful on the individual level. And then on the organizational level, or even like the culture, organizational culture, like be open about having those having those conversations that we talked about earlier in the show, Dr. Kimberly, is being open with having conversations about things that you need or things that would support you to be successful in the space that you're in, and having those conversations, because I do think that you'd be surprised how much leaders actually want to hear from their people on what would make their space and their environment more supportive, right? Because I think when our needs are met, we are not only happier and more joyful, but we're also more productive and more efficient and
more profitable.
And more profitable. Exactly. It is all integrated. It is all linked. And I think that's the piece that sometimes we forget, that when we focus on just like productivity or profitability, all very important things. But it works. It seems to work better when there is also happy people, joyful people, people that feel good in their bodies, that are energetic. They're more likely to create and innovate, right? When there is that integrated piece.
I wanted to ask you something on that challenge. I don't know why I thought of this. For those perfectionists and those who just like to make or self-sabotage, I was thinking about being intentional. Is it important to have obtainable intentions for the week? Like, I know if I said to myself, and I've done this before, like, I'm going to clean out that front room this week. I don't have time to clean out the front room this week. Like, why? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. I mean, I think definitely being very realistic. And at the end of the day, you know your capacity, but you also know what you have room and space for. And so I think it's also great to be ambitious, and, with your example, if you want to clean out the front room, right, putting it down, and then if it doesn't happen, not beating yourself up about it, right?
Okay.
I think is really, really important. I would also say, considering if someone like you goes through the thought process, like, I want to clean out the front room, but I know I don't have time to do that this week. Okay, well, what's one thing I could do for that, right? So maybe it's not the entire room is cleaned out, but maybe it's a few things are picked out that you put to the side that you're going to donate, or whatever it might be, right? Start with one step, and then maybe the following week it's another step. I think sometimes, especially high achievers, and I know you mentioned perfectionists, we get a little bit ahead of ourselves in that we are going to do it, and we are going to do it to the T. And if it's not, then then I didn't do anything. Right. It's unacceptable. Right. I didn't do anything, even though you probably still did a few things. And I think sometimes too, that's what ends up happening, is we set ourselves up for these big things. I'm going to do this whole thing. And then say you only, did a few things leading up to it. We don't give ourselves credit that, well, wait a minute, I did do Right? I started on it. I'm on my way.
Right. It's an approximation of success, right?
Yes,
A
yes,
little closer.
yes. And I do think that when we are hard on ourselves in that way, and when we self-sabotage, create, we actually do create levels of burnout for ourselves, like internally,
Right.
like emotional, mental, and physical. Especially if it happens regularly, right? That it's a pattern, right? Setting ourselves up for all these things and then beating ourselves up when we don't get it done.
Right. Right. Experiencing that lack of professional or self-efficacy. It's like, I can't do anything right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And then we miss out on the things that we did do, right? And I think that's why also that question of that I love to invite people to consider is at the end of each week, what am I proud of this week? And acknowledging, and it could be this, it doesn't have to be this grand thing. It could be that, I said I wanted to go to bed at 10 o'clock every night, and I did that 2 times out of 5 this week, right?
Right.
And acknowledging that and recognizing it.
Right. It's a little bit more than you did last week.
Exactly, exactly. And I find that also fuels us to want to continue, right? And see what else we can do and then continue to improve. It gives us that almost fuel and that momentum. But when we overlook things that we have done and recognizing and acknowledging it, I think then it's very easy for us to be like, a little bit down on ourselves and get to the point of like, I can't do anything right, or I'm not doing anything. Well, is that true?
Wow. Well, thank you so much for those nuggets. And I put on here how everyone can get connected with you on LinkedIn. You've had so much wonderful advice and information for us. And we really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kimberly. I enjoyed being here. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and just the open conversation. This has been great. You gave me a few nuggets as well.
All right. Until next time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. You've been listening to Leadership Beyond Burnout. I'm your host, Dr. Kimberly L. Wilson. Tune in to us here every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. Pacific. And until next week, we will see you then.